Well, ladies and gentlemen, happy fall upon you all. May you forever prosper and be glorious. We are back and it feels really good. It's not the first one since the summer, but it is one since the summer, which is really great. But we have a wonderful time ahead of us this afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are at. But since you're mostly in Europe, I would assume it's in the afternoon. So it's me and Tolva here with you today, obviously, and we have our wonderful guest Lune with us too, which I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. I hope I did it not too bad, but we have clearly we've decided on a Scandinavian theme this time. So we have Tove from Denmark, and I'm from Sweden, and then Lune from Norway. So yes, just rocking that, just a glorious anointed trio, and which is really good. So the topic for this time and for this month is emotional intelligence, an essential ingredient in 21st century leadership, which I think is a wonderful topic. And I'm working with the DTS right now, so I'm particularly excited today to hear about this too and see how it works in this season. So, but I will hand over to Tove that will introduce our speaker.
Yes. So I'm so happy to introduce Lone. She is actually Danish, but she works in Norway currently. So it is a bit of a Scandinavian trio, though, even though two Danes and one Swede. I have known Lone mostly from afar. I think actually I met her in South Asia at one point. Otherwise, her and her husband, Doug, they've been working in South Asia for many, many years. Actually, Lone, she did her DTS the same year that Johan, he was born. That's just for just interesting information here. So her DTS was 87, 88. They've been leading a work out in South Asia, her and her husband, for many years, and been pioneering a number of different ministries, actually. But more recently, you have moved back to Norway, to Grimrud, and are now leading the Grimrud base. And so I thought this would also be a wonderful opportunity just to get to know you a little bit, and in that sense introduce you back into Europe as well, for people to get to know you. I know that you have you are in Norway, but you are there also as I guess with someone with a huge heart for the unreached peoples, so that your heart is beating for the unreached as well as the youth of today. So I think you're a very good cross-cultural missionary, in the sense that you have now moved back into Europe and you dived into also studying youth and youth culture and media. So in a way, just really taking on that transition and trying to be relevant where you are. I see you as a strategist, Lone, and definitely a pioneer. And we will get to hear more about that here. You have 3 children, grown children. So I guess in that sense also interacting with youth in that aspect. But I'd like to hear, before we dive in, if there's anything else you would like to share with us, maybe from your YWAM journey. So anything you want to bring in here in my very short introduction of you?
I don't know, but it seems like YWAM is changing constantly, and we need to always also see, is this a good change or not a good change, but also how do we adapt to the change? And I think that is some of values. How do the values look like in this century? How can we still emphasize the values, but maybe look a little bit different than it did when I was young? So that, I think, is a growing kind of tension for us, many of us who's a little bit older, to adapt to where we are at this moment. So there's one thing I was just thinking about adding into.
Excellent, thank you. And I should say also, just maybe before we dive too much in here, that the theme that is this emotional intelligence, and essential ingredients in the 21st century. And there is a number of different resources already online. So we have John Peachy on with an LDX talk, so a 10-minute talk. and Holger Schein also with on emotional intelligence, and especially in conflict situations, yeah, several very good articles as well, like necessary endings and so on. So please go on and see what's there. It's incredible resources that are being loaded. But over to you, Johan. Should say that two of us, we have a cold, so we may sound a little funny. That's Lone and I. So if you cough too much, it's over to you, Johan.
Yes, I guess I'm the least cold out of this one.
Yeah.
So that's the sign of the season, isn't it? It's fall time. Hallelujah. So let's start with that as a question, like emotional intelligence, an essential ingredient in 21st century leadership. What comes to mind when you hear that statement? Is it even a true statement? And if it is a true statement, what is it that comes to mind to you?
Yes, I think it is to a certain extent. The reason why maybe at this time there's much more focus about you as a leader has to kind of facilitate the people around you more than just getting the work done. And there's a higher pressure on us to really to kind of being a shepherd, even for the one we lead. Before we were just a leader, could just not really care that much about how people felt about around us. But today, and where the world is going and where we are at, there's been much more focus about how we kind of really are working with people. It's not only about team building, but it's a much more of self-awareness constantly. You kind of mirror yourself, you kind of work on yourself, you're just you're beating that drum all the time. So I think it is true, even among us Christians, but also in the world for sure. But even much more among us Christians, I think it is a valid point, and also because we are mixing faith into even leadership, this is much more sensible issue because we're mixing about a deeper sense in people. So we have to be much more aware of how we are afraid, how we're meeting people, how we're caring for people, even for us as leaders, how we are self-aware.
Yeah, that's great. So is that something that when we say about growing in emotional intelligence leading today, is that something also then that's more relevant for the younger generation that's coming in? And I guess we should say young. When we say younger generation, we're kind of thinking 25 and younger, or is that something that you've noticed in for us, for those who are older too? I mean, I'm 35, so I don't know where I land on the spectrum, depending which context. But is it something that is particularly relevant for young ones, and and how that looks like? Or
I think it's very important for all of us, but I think the young one has worked much harder on it because it's a part of them. They're much more self-aware, much more than we was. They're working much more. They're constantly viewing themselves. They're constantly, what image do I have? They're much more aware of these kind of things into the bad way, maybe, but it is also kind of constantly. People talk more. Oh, he's a social awkward. He is. He doesn't know it. He is kind of. So they kind of view more like we did not have these words before.
oh, really? Yeah.
We maybe had people that was a little bit strange, but we would never put. But people, the young people are very fast in knowing what is going on, and they're much more self-aware, but it's also aware of where people are at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, then, in terms of expectations on leaders, is that we need to be more aware how we're being. How do I say? I would maybe then feel more as an older person that I might be a bit quicker to be judged on how I am and how I act. Does that make sense? I guess. So to go with that, what would be some ways to strengthen that for us leading in general, I guess, but also considering who's coming in? What would be some ways that we could grow in our emotional intelligence and some tools to help us be more aware?
I think is constantly to kind of have self-reflections to say where are you and where do you need to work as a leader, and where is your kind of smaller weaker points, see that your weaker points, but also work on your strong points even more. I think we more maybe before work more in general all over, but I think it's a little bit important actually to focus on the things that you can where you are good and focus on them, but also work on your weaker points constantly. That is what
Yeah.
I think it is very, and to be honest, is a very, like I said, it's more like being a pastor. You're both a leader, you're a pastor, and you're kind of, you're much more easily judged, and it comes
Yeah.
out much more both with the media, but also in kind of, I hear staff that talk much more about, they view people much more than they did before.
Yeah.
So it's much more critical thinking out there. So we as leaders has to constantly also, yeah, kind of having people that can speak into our lives, mirror us, don't get offended, and constantly read books also, and listen to things that keep us constantly into become better and better leaders. So we serve the people we are around better and better.
That's good. So with that, would there also be then, what do you say? Would this generation care more about image too? So since social media is such a big part, and Instagram, which shows the best parts of who we are, would I as a leader then also need to think about how I dress myself or how I look? Do you see what I'm saying? Would that be something, or is that taking it too far in terms of being a bit more shallow in how I present myself? That it's always important as a leader to present yourself and how you dress, but just have that in mind of, am I cool enough, or does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
I think that the thing is general with people and young people, they're much more about authentic.
Yeah,
So if they
that's good.
see you authentic in your dress code, and then you can be actually super boring. But if you're authentic and you're authentic in whole your life, they want
Mm,
that.
yeah,
So I also heard comments of people trying to dress up a little bit cool, and they
yeah,
kind of look through and they say, they're like, this is really weird. So they want you, they're not only about that you dress, but it's about if you're authentic.
no,
Um,
that's good.
you can get away with a lot of things, I think, with just being if you are authentic. But though
Mm,
I think in general, like it's always nice to be yourself in it, but also be aware of you. Actually, your dress can kind of pull people off. But
yeah,
I think the authentic is the biggest thing. It's the
yeah,
huge.
love that. That's so good.
Mm.
Wonderful. Do you have a question? Do you have something more, Tove, you want to add, or a different question? You're muted, Tove.
I'm sorry, I coughed just before.
All right.
Yeah, I'll just totally echo what you just said about being authentic. That's
Mm,
that on everything. It's a pastor in the church, but it's also you being out among people, us as leaders, peer to peer. It's just the very center of everything, and I think that
mm,
resonates with who God is. That in that sense, He can also only meet us where we are at. In that sense, but I was thinking, I still find it quite interesting that you have been so many years in South Asia, and then now back here. What would you say are the difference? We know youth culture maybe goes across, but um, in some ways, of course, there is a cultural difference as well. What would be some essential skills when we talk about emotional intelligence? Some tools that you needed to use out there that you needed to maybe reshape or shift in using back here in Europe.
Mm. I I think in general in every culture there is the empathy that you need to have. I had to have that in India or in Asia, or I had to have it also here in Norway and in Europe. So I think that in general, like we have to have that kind of empathy and meet people. But over there, maybe I could be more bold. I could be much more like straightforward. I could kind of put more expectations up to the standard where we want to have things. This sounds very strange because we talk about Asia, we should have the same here. But here, when I work in this culture, yes, I can. But there's always these things that you're feeling like you're overstepping boundaries with people and you're
Mm.
pushing them too far. You're constantly aware of, can I actually put that kind of pressure on them? Can I ask them to work a little bit longer? Can I do that? So I
Mm.
found that a much more difficult setting where I felt like in Asia we worked much more about we need to get completed a task and that take us whatever it costs us to do that. Um, If it's 12 hours one day, then it's okay. But here I find that maybe there's more in Norway, but it's much more regulated by your working hours, and that determine actually what you can put. So I think I could be much more expect things. I could be much more direct in some ways. It doesn't sound the right thing in a culture that is warm, but it was that. Where here I think is much more soft. We have to be much more soft. Yeah. If that makes sense. It sounds really strange.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I was thinking through my cultural training and my own. I'm like,
yes,
oh, it seems
Yeah.
almost contradicting. So I'm just like, oh, where does this land?
Yeah.
It's a
It
whole
is.
conversation on its own.
Yeah, because the
Okay.
thing is, in one sense, this is a cold culture in here in Europe, and then you meet a warm culture, so it should be opposite. But here, I find
Yeah.
myself like I could be much more expecting, and whatever, and we will go for it. We will be much more into it together, and there's this kind of caring, we carrying it together, and there maybe the warm culture comes in, where we're carrying it together. We are for one task, and we go for it. We don't complain on that task. Where
Yeah.
here I have to hear much more suffering, and I have to hear much more people feeling sorry for themselves, or they're sick, and I don't remember it so much there. So that's one of the things I have to adjust myself to. I'm not used to that kind of thinking here.
yeah,
Could it be that here it's more about independence, and that
Yeah,
means that you're intruding on my free will and who I am and what I'm doing. So it's a more treading carefully versus if you're in a warmer climate culture. It's more the expectations of the togetherness. So there's less individualism to hurt or to step over the boundaries. That was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
For sure.
yeah, I agree with that. At the same time, there's been a massive shift, I think, here at home as well.
Yeah.
Because I think when you left, for instance, Europe, it was not quite like that here either.
Oh no.
So there's been a shift with the younger generation where some would say that there's lesser resilience in some ways, but there's another things sides that are definitely plus.
Yeah.
And maybe just a side note, but I found it interesting too that typically we would say maybe Asia as well, but there's a lot of cultures and nations that are more shame based, and you would tend to say that in Europe it's more on guilt, more than shame. But I think that has shifted as well, hasn't it? Like in some ways you have shame as a big thing here. I don't know if it just came with social media or when that set in.
Yeah. Yeah, we have noticed it, and we have focused a little bit about it in Norway, about it really, that big shame has come in. So many young generations are not feeling guilty, but they're shameful about what they've done, or they're shameful about what they're thinking. And if you can look at it, I think it is I'm not sure really where it's shifted and how it is, but it's not. But we're not dealing with it fully either, like a shame-based culture where the elders come in and take away. But it is this kind of huge shame culture that pulls young people down, especially. And I normally don't talk to young people about. I talk about guilt, of course, but I ask, do you feel shameful about things you have done, or you're shameful about the things? And it can be things that are not done, but it's more the feeling they're constantly shameful. So that is interesting. Is again one of the things I've seen the last 5 to 10 years, together with what we talked about just recently, about that we cannot ask people to do a little bit extra. So it's just interesting how things have shifted around. And I think it is a little bit about the image coming in, because in the shame, we are actually asking the whole public to kind of give me my feedback of who I am and what I'm post. And so therefore, I think the shame comes into that whole global thing, that is the whole kind of all the people around there, that they kind of determine if I'm shameful or not. This is the whole community kind of determine if it's shameful or not. This is kind of interesting with the younger generation.
It is. And one of it, of course, when it comes to social media, it goes across not just young people, does it? I mean, right now we have elections here in Denmark, on a local level, and some politicians, people are giving them a really hard time, on social media. So some, they have decided to just not be on social media, not just open it because they just can't deal with it. And don't want to deal with it. Others say, how can you have elections and not be very active on social media? So I think there's even a shame-based aspect there, and of course there's many other aspects into that.
There's much more pressure about social media and standing up for something different, and it's just a total different ballgame than we had before. That we cannot really understand the pressure people are under, and how they're whipped and how they're chewed and how they're kind of spit out again. It's much more cruel world, and I think the younger generation also feel it, and I've been living under it for a long time. And I think that is what they really fear. They do something, a mistake, that will come, and the consequences will be so huge that is out there, that we don't live with. We didn't live with that. So, and I think there the shame comes in. So is, on another hand, then it's kind of interesting. Just a kind of sideline maybe, but what I found, like when we are leaders, the way we model a lot of leadership is to be down to earth, what's more. They want to see your life. Are you living your life? Are you living it what you're saying you are? Because even they say whatever I post is who I am, but actually they want to have a leader that lived a life like they're speaking. And another thing me and Doug has been thinking about, maybe 20 years, 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when you were speaking in Norway and Europe, you have to kind of not saying anything about you personally, kind of, you don't need to share any personal stuff in your sermon. You just have to give a sermon, and you can give some examples, but not personally. That was a no-go. Don't kind of discuss or kind of say out something your personal stuff. But now, they don't believe your sermon before you actually told us personal story where you made a mistake, where you learned something, where you're showing you're human. This I found very interesting. So when we are preaching much more, we are thinking about how can I make my sermon relevant, where I'm sharing also this is a part where I'm struggling, or maybe that is where I made mistakes, and that is where so I found that what they want true, authentic life, and it's which where you are not afraid of sharing who you are and sharing something they can learn from. And so that is something we didn't have maybe 10 years ago, where there was much more secrecy about your private life. Now your private life has to also show that actually you live what you preach in a sermon. So it's kind of interesting. So you be careful not to just portray yourself as a perfect person. That they don't need, that they don't want. They want authentic life. And that means you have some mistakes also. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. So on that theme then, to practice what you're teaching, I guess, what will be something for you in your leadership? So maybe mistakes or things in related to this area that you want to be aware of and that you try to work on to be a good leader?
Do you want to see my long list? The problem maybe my problem is I always see all the things I can improve. So I keep on beating myself up more for that. But the thing is, one thing I think I realized many times over the years, in special, I somehow are afraid to take the crucial conversations. I'm maybe afraid of, because we live in this culture where we have to make sure leaders are easily kind of ask for forgiveness and are the first one to kind of acknowledge that done something wrong. So, and because we are with organization, we have this kind of things that we really kind of want to ask forgiveness. So sometimes I think I lay myself down too fast, and just say, take the problem on me, or like saying, yes, I see that, or you must, sorry for that. Can you please forgive me for that? That was wrong. Instead of sometimes even asking, yeah, but what do you see you could have done different? I easily make myself a little bit more the victim in it, because I want to be a good leader, and I want to be, in one sense, a defensive in that moment also, and not being aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a big one.
Yeah.
I think it's that daring to push back, and I think it's the kind of thing to do to someone else is with what do you say, leading them into the freedom of them also being self-reflective on their own things. Because if you're just taking it on yourself, you're not inviting them into the freedom they can walk in. So I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Is there anything, any other big thing from that list that's really good to be self-reflective about as a leader?
One thing is sometimes I'm afraid of being too aggressive, I'm afraid of just, because we are so self-aware where we are now in our culture. I don't feel like there's a lot of room for making mistakes, especially as a leader. So the thing is, what I find for myself is that when I experience something that I think is a little bit challenging, or when I see a problem, I would like to go and fix it immediately. And maybe I do it too fast. That is my weakness also. I do it very fast because but also sometimes I come out a little bit rash. So I find it's a little bit like people don't have the same grace. I think that we had before, where people could more play out. I remember in old YWAM style, they had kind of hotter discussions, and they were like, "Whoa, fire!" And afterwards, they were fine. I don't think we have a lot of fire conversation anymore in YWAM on leadership levels. We are more polite. We are more like Sutton. We have all the emotions under control. So I'm not sure if it's only good. I'm just kind of thinking, because it makes me much more behave controlled leader. And maybe allow myself to say, that is not good. That's not fair. So I just find myself much more behavior controlled. Trying at least.
Yeah. And I think there's a point there. We're having a relationship teaching in our DTF this week, and we're talking about like actually the importance of heated conversations, because it's an expression of your individuality, and it's more about how you bounce back to joy after you disagreed. And actually, it can show on a deeper sense of trust if you can have a heated conversation without falling out of a relationship. So I do think there's a good point there, that we should be able to have it heated without it having to be a long process of asking for forgiveness and bringing everyone together and all these things. And of course, do that without saying things inappropriately and other things. But I think that risking our emotions and not having to be too self-aware, that's very good. That's beautiful.
And I think we are afraid of being honest in that moment because we know how to do it. So that is, I think, a weakness of us, if I understand me right in this. And I think we're losing out a little bit because we maybe then not very honest and authentic. So that is just my kind of view on it. So, and then we get so easily offended because we're not used to have a discussion. So when we have a little bit, then we get so easily offended. So we have no muscles to handle kind of stress conversations.
I think that's so true, because I'm thinking too, that if you're so subtle that it's just not coming across clear, but you are actually very upset, but it's not coming very, very much out, then a person will just leave hurt, and the conversation is not taking place, and then it comes out in different, just having that, then row in a way, and get to the bottom of things like that. So now you're in this beautiful situation. You're at Greenwood. I don't know how many staff are there now.
I think we're maybe 120, 130 staff.
Yeah. So that's just beautiful. So you're there with your husband, and you have a chance now to mold or set a tone on how you would like conversations to take place, as well as leadership. What have you? What kind of thoughts have you done? Or are you what conversations are you having with Dag and your team in what kind of culture, I guess you can say, you would want to have a place?
I mean, we're in kind of in a start grooves, huh? So we're just beginning to kind of do some of the things. Some of the things we are going to do. We're going to do more training on every week. So we're going to have a staff training every week, and because we are seeing we are lacking that with many of our staff. They come into YWAM, and then they kind of stay in that position for some years, and then they go out and they have not developed any skills. And we see many young people come in with not only young but also other people come in, and we don't develop the skills. And that can just be in conversation skills. It can be actually just baking. It can be doing something with practical things, and we need to train them in all kind of skills. So we're going to start that. We're also actually beginning to have a much more family culture. But we're going to have once a month. We are having a night where we just come together, have food, and have where only staff can come, and where we're having a time of worship and just minister to each other. Maybe have a small sermon, or maybe not even that. And we just come together because we want to make sure we see each other. One of the cultures also we want to is about generosity, but also finances. We talked about that, about clear communication. What do we expect? And we also prepare for growth. So we are going to set up a much more how we can grow with leaderships and all that. So it's a lot of things we work on, and we take one things at a time. But we want to mix into our base being a place that thinks inward but also outward, and that we develop our base inwardly, both in relationship personally, but also that we go out, that it'd be easy to go out from our place. So we send out people on a small teams, or long teams, so so we're trying to do it, develop it much more, make it much more like interesting. And we're also building out physically, because we believe that we are going to see a lot of things happening.
That's good.
So it's a little bit broad what we're doing, but it's a kind of expectation in the air.
Yeah. And I would say, isn't that always the beginning of a process? You're starting quite broad to assess what's happening, and then you kind of, as you get to know people and the situation, you add the things that are coming. I have a little bit of a side question that's not on the list of questions that we talked about earlier, and I don't know how well you'll be able to answer it, but it's the thing that you talk when we talk about shame and the ability to ask question and connect relationally. So because shame is the fear of disconnection, I read that somewhere, and shame is the thing that disconnects us from others. And I don't know where your studies went when it comes to culture and media and young people, but have you seen, or is there any sort of connection between being so much online and not being developed emotionally, and the ability not to handle conflict, because I'm dealing quite regularly with, like, I can be in a conversation with someone who's under 25, and they talk to me about a conflict that they've had with someone, and how they talked to this person intensely, and they've been very angry. And I've talked to them for 20 minutes, and I realized that conversation that they had all happened over messaging. And everything within me, when it comes to like building relationships, dealing with shame and all these things, like you can't do that over texting to create that, because you're not dealing with the dynamics of emotions and stuff like that. So I wonder, is there anything you come across, any thoughts on just the connection between a social media generation and the emotional maturity and dealing with shame and stuff like that?
Definitely, I think the emotion is actually, they are more older when they're 25 than they're 20. We expect them to be kind of older when they're 20. I think they need 4 to 5 years more. The head is more older because of the knowledge they have, but emotionally they're not. And I think there's a lot of, because of media, there is a lot of subconscious stress in them. And because of this shame, there's a lot of stress within them that comes out. And they are not used to handle like conflicts, like you're saying. They do it much more indirectly. They do it over messenger, which it become more nasty than ever. So I think what we're doing now, we're seeing a generation that is not used to conflicts. So when they're having a conflict, it becomes very big. They often don't resolve it. They just go on with life. They cannot live with it. So I think, and I think we need to teach them and keep on teaching them and keep on saying that. What do you do? How do you let the social media, the social way of being you? Are you under that, or are you above it? And we need to keep on talking about that, I think. So about if it's connected with shame, yeah, I think always it is. I mean, but how much it is, I'm not so sure about it in these conversations. Yeah. And I find that people can be very blunt on messengers, but when it comes to real
Yeah.
people, not.
Yeah. And it makes sense because you don't see the person. You don't have to deal because emotion is felt, not seen, right? So emotion, if you're not in the same room, you don't get to receive that anger that comes or that. So yeah.
I find a lot more miscommunication even than before, because our emotions tell us something than the fact, and we're listening much more to emotions if that is true or not. So it is a totally different ball game in this. Yeah.
Actually, on that note, I'm thinking of you may have heard about this. It was a Danish politician. I forget if he's Turkish or Pakistani, something like that. And I think it was potentially the first Muslim that came into government. But she was a good politician, and she got so much. She was just slammed, on social media, emails as well as a messenger. Just absolutely horrendous messages she get, and then she was just ignoring it. And then one of her colleagues said, why don't you go and have coffee with him? And she was like, and then she ended up she just took the one that has just been the nastiest and phoned him up and introduced herself and just invited herself on coffee at his home. And he was taken by surprise totally, because now there was a person. It was not just chatting, but it was a person and a voice. And so he said, "Excuse me, I have to go and ask my wife." And her thought, it was like, "My gosh, he's got a wife. How can he be this nasty and have a wife?" So she had also demonized him back, in a sense, that she had a clear picture of him. He must be a nasty person and probably living in the streets and maybe an addict, and he just made a whole image around him. So just realized she had demonized him back. And anyway, ended up going to his house. She brought cake, and it was a nice garden. She also didn't anticipate a nice garden. And when they came in, they had this man and his wife. They had the same china. They were drinking out the same cups that she had the same cups as her parents had. And now it was like, really, that brought it home. So she's inviting herself a dialogue coffee. And I think we should probably do more of that, invite for a dialogue coffee. And probably across generations as well, So now you've been studying, or you are studying, this youth culture and media. At the same time, I know on your base as well, there's quite a few people that are at a different age as well, a bit older. How do we keep healthy and mutually beneficial relationships between new and old leadership generations, would you say?
Yes.
There's different traditions, different expectations from both sides, right? So, yeah.
But I guess the clue was what you said, the coffee. I think the clue is that it's actually in our mind that we make up there is a cliff between us. Because there are not cliff, we are just in a different age group, yes, but there's no cliff. So I think is that with this generation that grow up now, more than the generation before, this generation want the older ones together with them. They want to linger in much more than we have seen ever before, I think, in many years. So I think where we actually need to be, we as the older generation should never think that we are outdated, that they don't want us. We should actually want us, because that is what they would do. It's not what I'm just saying, but they want us. So we should just be that authentic old people saying, hey, come around and come and have coffee in my house. And I guarantee you, they will say yes. For me, that has been a question where, for some years ago, I think maybe 6, 7 years ago, God took me on a journey where we always had people in a team where we lived that was the same age, so families and that, and was much easier to handle because they were like settled and they were much better in that sense, easier. But then when we had a young guy from Canada sitting with a dining table, because that was the only staff we got one period, and we're sitting there around the table, and I felt God was saying to me, Lona, are you ready? Are you ready to open up your dining table and to disciple a youth now of the day? Are you ready for discipleship? And for me, it was like a clear kind of invitation from God to say, are you willing to open up your home, your table? So for me, it's been like the dining table has been the place where I ask people to come in for meals, and we invite them in, and we just do life with them. We have done that over many years. We invited people into different days where they're sitting, coming in regular. We disciple them just to be a family, just to be secure in a family. And that is what we do. And that has made me much more, I think you could say, without boasting, that I easily relate to the youth and I easily relate to the old people because I just try to be myself. And I believe that I want it on both sides. And I just kind of share who I am. I'd be the same if I change a little bit though, but I'm not really changing a lot compared to who I meet. And I just invite them in, come in, sit around, share life. And they love it. So I think that is where we need to be much more intentional about how we discipleship and training young leaders doesn't happen just in a classroom. It just doesn't happen just in an office. It happens when you go alongside them. And with training now leaders, you have to use much more time than we did before. You have to have time to listen to them. You have to time to sit down with them. You have to get time to get to know them and call them out when they're doing the good things and call them out when they're not doing the best things. Love it. But you cannot, leadership and authority is not just given like that. It is earned by the trust you. And I think young people see, are you authentic? Do you want to invite me into your life?
That's very good.
And I think that is where we need to know the young generation want us, and we all has to get away with that thinking they don't want us. So I had people here on the base said like, oh, I would like to invite the young people. Do you think they want to come to our house? We said, yes, of course. And they invited 30 youngsters turned up, and they were total surprise. They loved it to be in that house, and they love to have them. So they want us. And we should also want them. It's so exciting to be with young people. Don't sit with your analytic thinking and thinking about what rubbish are they talking about. No, listen to them. Because they talk well, but they just talk a different way. So we should not judge them too hard. And also what I keep on doing as a leader, I keep on reminding myself about how was it when I was 20 years old? How did I think? How immature was I? That helps me a lot when I'm
Amen.
so much better. But it was actually already finished.
Yeah, that's very good. I think it's wonderful. I mean, basically what I feel you're explaining is the power of hospitality. And it's one of our values, and it's in the Bible, is to create the spirit of hospitality and really letting people in. And I think in YWAM, particularly because I'm on similar sized campus as Grimmerud, and I think it's also this, or for any campus, like you kind of already got a certain permission because people have joined the community. So I think for anyone who feels it's a bit awkward, you kind of already got partially permission to invite people without it being totally random, because you still have that connection. But I do have this is a more specific question for YWAM and living on a campus. How do you do when you can't invite everyone? because at a certain size, it's hard to keep a relationship with anyone. And what do you? Any thoughts? How do you think about that? Like who? Maybe not strategies for who to invite. That's too personal. But just yes, I would just love to hear your thoughts and with that.
I think the thing is to be aware of you cannot invite everyone, but you can make it also in turns who you invite.
Mm.
And I think on a base that is so big like yours and ours, is that we don't keep on inviting the same kind of group of people, but we are aware of the one who is more silent or in the side.
Mm.
That we don't see so easily. That of one we often neglect.
Mm.
So it's easier, and just speaking out for myself, it's so easy for me to invite the one that is more easy, that I function better with, that comes along easier for me. But then
Yeah.
maybe it's always the right one. So it's just constantly be aware of it, that we take turns in how we do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
also
and would
now we are going to ask people to invite into different homes, so we're sure people are invited in different
yeah.
homes.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think also being aware that my friends in Harpenden might see this, I need to phrase my questions really well so I don't get
Yes.
held accountable to high standards. But I would also say, I would say that particularly in leadership, you do have a certain. So this is a question, even though it comes out as a statement, that you have a certain obligation to also show more hospitality and maybe make that sacrifice more, because you have a natural power distance when you get a title. As much as we ignore it or try to pretend we don't have it in YWAM, it's just a fact statement. Like you do get that power distance. And I would say, as a leader, there is this invitation that you need to show that hospitality for your own sake, but also for the sake of the campus. But what would you think about that as a leadership responsibility, I guess, to exercise hospitality in that way and maybe sacrifice more than others would?
Yeah. And here comes in my cross-culture combination, huh? When I lived in Asia, that is not a question if you're a leader or not. You always have to show hospitality. I think we
Hallelujah.
all are called to be a leader, because we lead our lives where Christ is living within us. And so I think I agree with you, this is true. But I think in general, we all have that responsibility to be hospitable.
Love
Like
that.
you said, so it doesn't, for me, it doesn't add up into anything extra than I normally do to become a leader here.
Yeah.
I'm not done more, and maybe less than I've done before, because I've had much more work, so I could not do it so much like I want. But for me, it's something I always cultivated, because I always look to leaders or look to other people and see how they have done it, and I say I want to be like them. So for me, hospitality doesn't come by a title I get. That is something I practice whoever I am. Yeah, at least
That's
for me.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good.
It's very good. Yeah, no, fully agree. I think, as it has been said as well, that hospitality, that's a core of evangelism. I mean, that's actually the bottom of that. The value of that, it comes out of that. So I love that. I have been thinking in terms of hospitality and us living on basis. At the same time, we say, but it's not about YWAM. We're here for the kingdom, and we don't want to just create these monsters. But I want to bridge out, and in many ways, of course, we also want to see people that come to bases actually not live as tourists, where they are, even if they're just there for a short time, which includes the local. So how do we do that? To bridge the hospitality to be external as well, in a sense.
Yeah.
Of course, as a leader, you are responsible for your staff in that sense, but also responsible in settling them in, that they are not just tourists in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any thought there.
Yeah. One thing they've done on the base here, they have done they're having a family when they come in as new staff or single staff. They have a family that they kind of get connected to, to eat dinner with on a regular basis. We have not done this now after COVID. One thing they're doing another base that I encourage to do is that every foreign staff, they get actually a family outside YWAM, outside the base, that take them in, like maybe once a month, to give them a meal, but also give them a transition into Norwegian culture and teach them culture.
That's brilliant.
And that become like more than one, actually, to help them and also get them out of the base. I found with many of our foreign staff, they get stuck in a bases, and they don't get out. They don't know how to do life outside a base, um, and they don't know how to ask, and they would love to bound into a culture, but are stuck into a YWAM based culture. So I think that is something we need to learn to actually cultivate a culture where we are getting all this kind of people around us that really would love to facilitate for that and connect. And then you get actually even a deeper connection between the base and the local society as well. So I think that works brilliant in one sense, and it's been very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great idea.
Yeah.
Very good advice. We should put that in the chat in here.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a good one, I think.
Yeah. Like, for another question here then, when does emotional intelligence move you into weak or passive leadership? Like, we talked about it a little bit before, that there's a difference here, but or overly, you can also overly accommodate, in some ways in leadership, when trying to also grow mature and resilient disciples, robust disciples, if you can say it like that.
Yeah. I think it becomes into when we are afraid to make decision because we fear we are going to be not popular, or like we're fearing that people will leave us and people disagree with us.
Yeah.
And I find that is, as leaders, we somehow try to more oblige people and try to be liked, because that is a huge value now, compares to something there to make a standard on a basis, or maybe in a community, about how we think things should function. So in the long run, that makes us more lame, and we lose the cutting edge of a leadership, I think.
Yeah. Very good. What do you think, Johan?
I don't know. I mean, I do think it with the hospitality, because I struggle with that too. I'm on the asking rather than telling. I'm on the softer versus the harder, and it's something I'm praying through now in my leadership, and just like where does the line go? But I would take it back to the hospitality thing, because I think it's the knowing of a person, and have enough relationships that you can be straightforward. Because I think if the stronger relationship you can build, the more relational capital you can add to your situation, the more straightforward you can be without falling out of relationship. So
that's right. Yeah.
But yes, trying to work that out. It's a fine line between hurting someone and by being too harsh, and hurting someone by not being hard enough.
Yes, I was actually just reading, the parable of what is it called? No, it was not a parable. It was Psalm 23, where it talks about both the rod and the staff, so it's like one is a little bit more harder and the staff is kind of for the support. So it's these two, a rod and the staff, to know which tool to use at different times. Yeah. Johan, you have the next question, I think.
Do I have the next question? Yeah, okay. So I think the perception of the young generation coming is an increase of anxiety, depression, social anxiety. I'm not a professional, so I cannot discern how much is just new labels and how much is actually new medical things. But how do we champion leaders and shape good leaders in a generation where this is a very common thing, struggling with anxiety, depression, and so on? What will be your thoughts?
It's one I struggle with myself, really. I will hope I could give you some good answers. I struggle with this week. I even now had 4 people with anxiety attacks of youth. and it can be anything about culture. It could be things that is underneath or anything. So it's actually, I think, it's very hard to see they're so less resilient about anything.
Mm.
And the one that is resilient, we tend to give them more and more responsibility. And then we maybe warn them out as well. I think in general, like I constantly try to help them to think, do you need to do this? I try to ask them questions to who are you pleasing now? Are you pleasing people? Are you pleasing God? Or who are you pleasing here? I try to constantly ask them questions. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Even I think the thing is really for many, I think is the whole social media has taken over a lot of it's very intense on them more than I thought.
Yeah.
So the way they have to be on the whole time, the way they have to view themselves, is much more pressure as us also a leader.
Yeah.
And they want to be known, they want to have a name. I find it very hard actually. I should actually
Yeah.
want to say this is the things I see. But I think to walk along them, to champion them, and not being afraid to take the hard questions,
Yeah.
to sit down and listen to them, that is what I do normally. Um,
Good.
but I've not found really anything that really solid works.
No. So with the risk of creating a confirmation bias, well, but just your opinion, having been in YWAM for a couple of years and in leadership for a couple of years, would you say that's true, that it has been an increase and it's something that you see compared to what you've experienced 20 years from now, like 20 years back in time working in leadership? Is it an increase with anxiety, depression, worry? Like,
Oh yeah, I've never seen like in this level I am seeing. Like, listen, we have many youth here. Most of them are exhausted. Most of them are sleeping a lot. They are. I never seen like thing like that. I seen even all stuff that's older. All of them are burned out, kind of. And I'm wondering, what are they burned out of? I mean, like seriously, I can work easily 50 hours a week, without problem. And cannot. So I think it's the whole balance of life. If you're not fulfilled in Christ, if you're not kind of about a social intact, and if you don't have a balance in life, I think that bears us out. And if our identity is what we do, not in Him, I think that really is a huge thing. I think in my mind is a huge thing. Where is identity? And I honestly, I think there's many who doesn't have the identity in who, I mean, in God, in what they do in God, but more how they can be seen and how they can be doing things well for other people.
good. So I don't know if this is the final question. I'm looking at your time, but what will be something that us being older, I'm putting myself in the middle there again, you're saying, looking at the younger generation, what is it that we need to be careful to celebrate and to champion and to look out for in the younger generation that we might overlook because we think work harder? Do you see what I'm saying with a different grid? What are a couple of things that we need to champion and keep an eye on the younger generation?
I I think one thing I see in general, like they're much more caring for the environment and they're caring for the world. They actually care for each other in a different way than we ever did.
Yeah.
Much more easy for change. They're much more, they want authentic living, which I think is a good thing. And they're much more faster on the mobiles and all that, which is a good thing also. They get out the message if they want to get out the message. Some of them are not afraid of being radical to stand in that. They are, I've never seen in this generation, like I see now, such an increase in worship and even in prayer. It's more the corporate prayer than the silent prayer themselves, but the love of prayer meetings much more than 20 years ago. The worship we have now is much more like, maybe it's emotionally, but it is there. So there's a lot of good things. They're much easier to adopt to different cultures. They love cultures. This is a huge thing for a mission movement. They're entrepreneurs. They create new things. They think newly. They constantly think how we can do it better. I think it's a big thing. There's a lot of things to take from these generations.
That's great. Love that.
That's a fantastic note to kind of end on, because there's so much as you say, entrepreneurship, there's so many ideas and people want to make a difference. As a desire to do that. So it should be a high day for YWAM as well, if we can figure out how to do this well, to facilitate that energy, and champion that energy.
Yeah, I
So
really
Lone,
have.
thank you so much. We have
Can I just say, I say like there is a lot of hope for this generation. Let us celebrate, look for the good things instead of look at the bad things, because I see a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope. I have this hope that this generation will do what I didn't do. Yeah. So I'm very hopeful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We do have a final question, and that is, if there's any books you would like to recommend to us.
Yeah,
There's time, so love to hear.
I have actually one I read in the summer, kind of interesting, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a strange one, but I found that I can do many more habits, and it's a good one to think about what I have a bad habits, but also how I can add my new habits without become a huge effort to do it. And it's just change a lot of things that I never kind of could change before, that I see that I just made a lot of small changes which make my day totally different. Also, another one, my daughter came with me. It's Norwegian though here, but it's called Fervent in English, and it's from Beskila Scherer, and it's been a good book because it goes in where is your passion, and it's about getting up the prayer momentum again going, but also where is a passion? Have you lost a passion? And I got it from my daughter. I was saying, this is a very good book. It's not everything maybe I agree, but that is good. But it kind of get me back to where is my passion.
Excellent. Just to make sure I got the first one, that was Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's kind of a very different book. It's not I don't think it's a Christian book, but it's actually very helpful for us. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Lone, I want to thank you for your time, for joining us today. And you will find this chat online and you can share it with your friends. And invite also from Grimroad, to the ELC. So next month, Johan, what's the theme? This is a test.
Then I will fail greatly. I do not know what the theme is for next month.
I do know.
This is a test for you, Tove. This is a test for you, Tove.
I wrote it down. It will. I'll have it up here in a second. Oh, that's right. That's work-life balance. There you go. Work-life balance. So that's.
We don't need to talk about that. We do that perfectly.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. So thank you, Johan, too. That's been fun.
Thank you, Tove. Good.
Yeah. So have a beautiful day. Rest of the day.
Yes. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.